Hello guys, it's the Caribbean Bookworm, and in this video I wanted to make a bookish or a booktube type of discussion video, which I haven't done in quite some time. And I wanted to have this one being specifically about a particular criticism in regards to the booktube community. And this was inspired after I saw a video by the meta narrator, who is a fellow booktuber, an Indian booktuber that I think is a literature student. And she made this really interesting video, I thought, with a very extreme title called, I think, Calling Out the Frauds of Booktube, and in which basically, even though the title seems very specific and very like targeted, the video was basically about like some criticism in general about the Booktube community, which I fully agree with. And now, as the years have gone on, which I have quite a couple of years now being on this in this community, I tend to notice some of these things myself. And hence why I'm calling this video basically the pressure of booktube, as I've noticed these things appearing as like certain pressures, especially on content creators and people that wish to like start their own content, start producing their own content basically. So in regards to this, I have my own criticism. So without further ado, let's jump into the case of the pressure on booktube. So I've thought about this video and I've thought about how I'm going to do this, and in particular I'm going to divide this video into three sections. I'm going to first talk about the case for there being a pressure on booktube. Then I'm going to talk about what you personally can do to deal with this pressure if you're feeling this pressure. And it's not just on booktube, as we'll see, it's also for other like forms of bookish social media as well. So whether or not you focus a lot on your Goodreads or on Book Talk or on Bookstagram, this applies for all of these. And lastly, we're going to conclude these in like the third part of this video. So without further ado, let's jump into the case as to why there might be a pressure from the bookish community. Well, my first main argument and the more global argument for basically the thing which causes this type of a pressure thing that is happening in booktube, in my opinion, is that basically a lot of content creators are in some way or fashion tying their identity to reading. And this can often be noticed with the remark of things like, oh, are you a true reader? Or, oh, are you someone that's like literally inept or something? And when you think about it, at least in my opinion, when you think about it, it seems to be a statement that doesn't have a lot of sense in some way. Because, for example, if you're someone that eats food or consumes different types of food, would you go around and say that you are a food connoisseur? Some people, of course, I would imagine do that, but in general, I think there isn't a lot of sense to such a statement, because every human being in existence eats food, unless you're like a Britarianist or something, which is a thing, by the way, but I wouldn't recommend that lifestyle. Yeah, you consume food. So in the same sense, I'd say that things such as watching a TV show, watching movies, or reading books are things which like tying or creating this label to it. I don't think that makes a lot of sense in this a very logical standpoint, because you have movie buffs, you have series buffs, you have like people that read constantly, but I think everybody does that to some extent. So the way in which, if I were to rephrase myself, the way in which this is typically used by people in the bookish community is as this sort of a condescending thing to say that they are in essence better than other people who haven't read so and so book. And this is dangerous. It is, in essence, the pinnacle of this type of herd mentality, and also a type of like try to jump the bandwagon type of thing. So basically, tying your identity so much to one thing, it has consequences, both good and bad. Good consequences being, of course, that you're going to try your best to like maintain that image, and the bad part being that you're going to tie that one thing to your like self-image. So if you end up not reading as many books as you set out for your, say, annual goal on Goodreads, then you're going to be really harsh on yourself, or you're going to be really harsh if you haven't produced like a video every day for one full month. If you're a book content creator, or you try to regularly stay up to date to your Goodreads or any other form of like social media bookish format like blogs or whatever it might be, if you feel this type of pressure coming up, then I think you're also like someone that is being subjected to the pressure of being like part of this bookish community. So as there are pros and cons, and especially the cons are very drastic of making something wholeheartedly your identity, the solution or the nuance for that would be to, in essence, have your identity be tied to more than just one thing. Like you're someone who's capable of doing more than just, for example, reading. Like you're someone that can say work good with your hands, or you're someone that's really good at languages, at the arts, or at whatever other thing you have going on in your life. All of these things are things that make you up, make the person that you are up. So in that sense, basically, when you fall behind one of your like activities, or just want any other thing in life, like it can even, without being like artistic pursuits, it can be things like being someone that's like constantly trying to groom him or herself, or whatever other thing it might be. If you slack, you still have other things to fall on, and you still basically don't feel completely crushed and defeated. My second argument, in which I tend to see that okay, this sort of a pressure thing, it exists, is basically the reading culture in these book communities. So whether it be, again, like any of the social media platforms like Goodreads, or like Book Talk, Bookstagram, or like Booktube, like which is the main platform which I am on, there exists an unspoken, well, for a majority of the time at least, unspoken, but now more and more people are trying to talk about it. There exists this type of culture in which you have to read a lot of books, and it might sound obvious because of course, like, you're creating bookish content, so you want people to see more stuff out there. But it has gone on to a very toxic extreme, in which people are trying to basically compare themselves to like big booktube, like booktubers out there, by reading like 100 book a month or something. For someone that's very like busy, that has a busy lifestyle, or has other things going on, you might not feel that you can meet these extreme criteria. So reading so many books, or reading specific types of books, like for example, one thing that really sets a lot of like booktubers apart is that sometimes they read some of the more mainstream books that are out there. So recent releases are often things that are being read and reviewed, and even shown in like book hauls, or bookish vlogs, or like reading vlogs specifically. So seeing people read books and such. So these are things that are majorly part of this book community, in essence, using reading, and in particular books, to create a sort of an aesthetic, you could say. Like if I were to compare this to like a clothing aesthetic, I would say it's the closest thing you can get a lot of times to like dark academia. It isn't necessarily every time dark academia, because some people don't have that like antique and that sort of an academic classic British vibe to their bookish content. Personally, I like that style, don't get me wrong. But basically, booktube falls very closely, case in point, to like an aesthetic, you could say. Like you create an aesthetic out of reading. And of course, there, like I said with the first argument, there are pros and cons to that. But when the pressure becomes really amped up, this is where you start running into problems for yourself as the content creator, and as the person that just likes, like you started out reading as a hobby. Now that I've made my case for there being like this invisible like hand that is like ranking up the pressure of content creation, what can you do about this, especially in the book and the booktube community? Well, that is going to be my part 2 of this video, and what we're going to segue right now into. One thing and one truth which I've sort of solidified in my head, which really helped with this, is this simple fact: people don't have to know what I'm always reading. Now, that might seem obvious, but believe me, especially after having experienced that pressure firsthand, it is not obvious. Like, especially if you're really into like try to pump out content related to books, you feel like everything that you read needs to be monitored to some degree. Everything that you read needs to be like posted on YouTube, or at least mentioned on like Goodreads, or added to your like want to read or your read like list. And you feel the need to include every single book in there, even the least relevant books that you might even be able to conjure up in your mind. So for this, I noticed that in order to truly take control again of basically what I'm reading and also indirectly to actually enjoy what I'm reading, sometimes, especially if I don't feel like talking about certain types of books on my channel because I don't want to kind of steer my channel into particular directions, I just don't talk about that book. If maybe I want to mention it in like a vlog or another bookish type of talk video, then I might occasionally bring that book up. But it's not like I want to do like full-fledged reviews for everything that I want to read, if I'm being honest with myself. Because some of the books which I read do not fall in line at all with what I've basically set my channel around. For example, I like reading classic literature, though that doesn't show on my channel. I have read my fair share of classic literature. Mainly on my channel, you just see a lot of Stephen King and a lot of like popular science and science content. But besides that, I occasionally like to dabble into psychology as well. I mean, psychology is a science, but I don't talk a lot about psychology, frankly, because one, I just think it's not my field, and two, also it's just more personal to me, and that also lines up with the fact that I do occasionally like reading self-help books, things in which you can kind of develop yourself, either like emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, and even financially, which I don't feel like making videos about. And that's okay. You don't have to make videos on every single thing that you read or update it on a particular site. It's okay to keep some things for yourself. Secondly, it's okay to not read regularly. And even more so, it's okay to not always finish a book. Now, again, maybe with some experience, you already know this truth, but for those of you who might be struggling with some one of those two things, it's okay not to read regularly. You're someone who I presume has like a life outside of YouTube, like you have things going on, you either have like school, university, like work, whatever it may be, a family, whatever it may be. So, of course, you're a busy human being, you have other things going on. And even if you didn't, if you don't feel like reading, it's okay just not to read. Similarly, as with the other things which I mentioned before, if you don't feel like eating or like watching a movie or whatever, it's okay. Like it's okay not to read regularly, case in point. And also, it's okay to not finish a book. Especially, I've tend to notice this as I've begun to read more nonfiction books. As I entered the reading of the nonfiction genre with the same expectation in a way as to what I was used to, and that is basically reading novels and like YA books. So basically, I would tend to jump into them by the means of reading them chronologically, like from chapter 1 to chapter whatever the book might have, chapter 10, let's say. And oftentimes, this is not needed for certain nonfiction books. For some nonfiction books, it benefits you, like for example, if you're reading like a popular science book in which the author writes like in a chronological order, because some popular science books are also written like non-chronologically, like just various different topics of interest. Or it also benefits you to read chronologically if it's like an autobiography or a biography of a person. But if for a lot of other nonfiction books, it's really not needed to read chronologically. And even in the case which I have mentioned before, you can a lot of times get away with reading non-chronologically by just picking the chapters which pique your interest. So having adopted that mindset, it helped me to feel less, you could say, guilty of like not finishing like a book, because it's like, oh, I can get back to this book whenever I feel like it. Or hey, if I'm not feeling like reading regularly, it's okay, I have other stuff going on, but when I have the time, I will get back to reading. Or if not that, and you still want to try to read regularly, you try to implement it into your schedule in a way that is realistic to you. Every time that I'm in a bus or a train, that's where I pop out my book and read my book. Or every time before you go to sleep, that's where you read your book. Whatever works the best for you, you adopt that in a way in which does kind of coincides with your current routine and schedule, and doesn't like push, it doesn't take too much out of you to kind of make that adjustment. Lastly, and what I think is the most important bit of kind of dealing with this pressure and becoming a bit more free from it, is if you're truly genuinely interested in like reading for your own sake, that's it. Read for you, not for your channel. That is, I think, in essence, the single most important bit which I can give you from this video, is if you're even if you're like if you're someone creating content for like booktube or whatever else, keep in mind that you started this like very likely because genuinely enjoy reading, you genuinely enjoy like thinking about the stuff that you've read. So a lot of times when we become a bit more like wanting of like views, of likes, and of growing your social media presence, you might lose sight of this. You might just focus on the things which you know will get you view. Like you might focus on like creating the content which you know people will watch, etc., etc. So even though this advice, it gives you peace of mind, if you keep in mind that you're reading for yourself, you won't stress about how many books you read per month and such. It does kind of like backlash with you if you're someone that really does want to grow a social media presence. If your aim is to grow a social media presence, then this mindset might not always benefit you. So do keep this in mind with my final bit of how you can kind of release this pressure. So only work on this step if you really feel like this pressure is becoming like unhealthy, you feel like you're comparing to yourself to unrealistic standards, then just keep in mind that you're reading for you, not for anyone else. But if you're someone that can handle like reading a set amount of books in a given month, if you're someone that can handle this pressure right now at least, then it's okay to do what is working right now, especially if you want to like rapidly grow your social media presence, then do what works. But keep this in mind if you hit like especially a reading slump, which tends to happen with a lot of us. So to conclude, we've seen basically why this pressure might exist. Like you have people out there, especially content creators, like tying their identities to like reading. And secondly, you have basically the whole reading culture that is like kind of established in these online communities, kind of implementing and enforcing the standards, sometimes a lot of times unrealistic standards, which you need to abide by, like reading a heck ton of books or like posting content every now and then, etc., etc. And if you're someone that feels like, especially if you're a content creator and you feel like this is getting a little bit out of hand, like you cannot basically enjoy reading anymore because you always have to have like a review every week or whatever your schedule might be, it's becoming too much, then ways in which you can kind of release yourself a little bit from this pressure can be to kind of remember that you've started like your reading journey for yourself and not for anyone else, so you can kind of take things slow, and also remembering that it's okay to not be reading regularly, like you have other things going on. And also you can take comfort in the fact that you can read whatever it is you want, and people don't really necessarily have to know what you're reading, like whatever it is that you might be interested in reading, like whether or not that thing which you're reading pops up on your social media like content, it depends on you. It depends on what kind of like profile you want to create for yourself, what kind of presence you want to create for yourself. Go with that. If you want to talk mainly about fantasy books, but you're also like rather interested in like non-fiction books about like war history or like documentaries and things like that, and you don't want to make your channel about that, it's fine. Like read those things which you still really enjoy reading, because they will give you like this motivation to like continuously read, or read at least a little bit regularly, while also like doing the stuff which you're posting on your social media presence, or they make you look forward to like that thing which you do regularly post on your channel. So say in this example, it's like fantasy books. So those are my 2-3 cents in terms of like this basically this effect which especially booktube is having on a lot of the people in the reading community. This is basically what I had to say about it, and it's what I've observed, especially after being a content creator myself and also feeling this pressure first-handedly. It is possible to deal with this pressure, it is possible to even get rid of this pressure, but it does mean that basically you have to remind yourself of certain things, and also sometimes it means that you have to sacrifice basically the like booming social media presence just for your own sake, just to continue enjoying to do the thing that you really like doing in the first place. So I hope this video was informative and helpful for you guys, and especially those of you creating content on bookish things. And I hope you guys look forward to seeing more stuff in regards to books, science, and whatever it may be that you're interested in this channel at the first place. Look forward to seeing you guys very soon, and bye.